the nut jobs who organized tonight's event. And we've got three speakers here tonight. We've got Dr. Tom Leman from Indiana Wesleyan University, an economist, who's going to be talking about Obamacare from an economic perspective. We've got Ron Massili, who is a former healthcare or health insurance executive, who's going to be giving some background on the history of the health insurance industry and healthcare in general from an insurance perspective. And Dr. Joe Lasanti who's a practicing physician, will be talking about Obamacare from how it's going to impact the physicians and the care they provide their patients. And before we do that, I'm just going to give a quick overview of our group and mention a few things we've got going on that you might be interested in. The Mercer County Liberty Group is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, local organization, and made up of local volunteers organized around the principles of limited government, free markets, and respect for the Constitution. We mostly try and promote those principles by education and political action. So tonight would be an example of education. An example of something we're doing around political action is something you may have heard of, the Ohio Healthcare Freedom Amendment. That's a ballot initiative in the state of Ohio to get a constitutional amendment on the ballot in November that would basically say the state, local, and federal government cannot make you buy health insurance. And we're collecting signatures for that in the back here. If you're interested in signing that, you just need to be a registered voter in Ohio. And actually, Dr. Joe Lasanti is going to be talking a little bit more of the details of that later. Another event we've got coming up is next Thursday. Representative Jim Beakey is going to be talking here at Coldwater Legion at 7 p.m. next Thursday on Senate Bill 5. It'll just be a legislative update, so it's open to the public. Obviously, that's a hot topic, so we expect a big turnout there. We're hoping, whether you're for or against that, undecided, you can learn something about it. One thing I just want to mention, I know some people are kind of skeptical that we're a nonpartisan group, and I can understand why, but we believe that the problems in this country may have reached a boiling point 2 years ago, but the water's been heating up for a long time, long before Obama came in office, and these problems didn't start then, and they're not going to end when he's out of office, and we understand that. So we really don't see the principles we're pursuing as a partisan issue. I do want to mention there's some things in the back there. I mentioned some of the things we're doing, and we're limited in the things we can do. We've got unlimited ideas, but very limited resources. We're limited in our time, and our talents, and our money. So if you're interested in helping us or helping the cause of these principles, and if you are interested in donating your time, your talent, or your money, we could use the help. We're not afraid to admit that we need help. We've got a big challenge ahead of us. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Dr. Tom Leman. And I just want to mention, all of these speakers are here. They're donating their time and preparation and being here. So they're here the same reason you're here, because they care about this. They care about how it affects them and then how it affects other people. So we just ask that you be respectful. If you have questions, I think there'll be a time for questions, but we just ask you to be respectful and not try and hijack the meeting, and just show respect and welcome them to Mercer County. So with that, I'll turn things over to Dr. Leman.
Thank you. It's good to be here. I feel a little bit at home. My grandparents are from Wilshire, Ohio, up north here, just a little bit from the family. And my grandfather started a hardware business there many years ago, and retired, deceased now. But I feel like I'm kind of back among salt of the earth folks here, where I kind of grew up, and visiting my grandparents. When I came here, one of the things that economists are fond of repeating over and over again is that there's no such thing as a free lunch. and I was going to kind of relate that to healthcare. But the first thing that Jack and Jose did when I got here was take me over and feed me free pizza. So that kind of undermined my whole, that kind of put that theory to rest there. So I don't know what I'll do. I'll try to work through without that basis. But I want to talk to you a little bit. I think this is the reason why Jack had originally contacted me, is just to kind of give you the economic perspective of Obamacare, the kind of the microeconomic perspective. Now, a lot of this material that I'm going to cover here, you've perhaps heard about before, or you're aware of, or you're familiar with some of the aspects, some of the mandates. Probably wouldn't be here if you weren't familiar with some of them. But others you may not have heard of. We're going to try to move fairly quickly here through this material. The macroeconomic element of the implications of Obamacare, I'm going to kind of leave that aside for the time being. And those of you who might be familiar with micro and macro, the macroeconomic implications would deal with things like the impact of Obamacare on the budget deficit, or on long-run economic growth, or on the effect it might have with the national debt, those types of things. We're going to leave that aside and focus, what I'd like to do is just in the next half hour, focus on primarily the microeconomic aspects of Obamacare and how it might alter incentives, both in terms of providers of health care and the patients and the demanders, the consumers of health care and health care insurance in particular. And this is kind of the order that I have prepared here. I want to go through just some data, just a little bit of a few slides. If you bear with me, a few graphs, a few kind of time series analysis here a little bit, just to show you what's happened in healthcare markets before and leading up to the reform that happened in 2009, 2010, and then talk about what the intentions and the mandates of the reform are, the political aspects and the economic aspects of that, and then just kind of draw some conclusions from that, and hopefully have time for a little bit of Q&A here, as then I turn it over to our next two speakers here. What I'd like to show you here is increase in the price of health care relative to overall inflation in the economy over the last, say, 60 years. And if you follow this little red line here, you see that the price index for healthcare services has increased much more rapidly than the overall CPI, Consumer Price Index, measuring just the overall price of goods and services in the economy and the overall rate of inflation. This next slide kind of shows you the rate of inflation, the annual rate of inflation, and the difference between the annual rate of inflation, the blue line, and the rate of inflation in healthcare services only. You see, there's only a couple of times over the last 60 years in which the rate of inflation overall has exceeded the rate of inflation in healthcare. If you go back to this slide, you see the red line rising much more rapidly, especially beginning in the 1970s, than the blue line here, which is just the overall rate of inflation measured by the CPI. And you see the same thing here, where the rate of inflation of healthcare is much higher or remains elevated above the rate of inflation for just the normal goods and services that you buy. Okay? Now, I would ask you to entertain the question, what causes that? Why is that? Okay? What is it that causes healthcare to rise at a faster rate, or the rate of inflation in healthcare to be higher than the rate of inflation of all the other goods and services that we buy? Here is the difference between the overall CPI and the healthcare services CPI. And you see that red line right here, that's just a linear trend line, just showing that the difference is positive over this period. In other words, on average, the rate of inflation in healthcare has been much higher than the overall rate of inflation in the CPI. And I think that's something that most of you are aware of, most people are aware of that. I just wanted to show that to you and begin to get you to think in terms of why is that, and what has perhaps caused that, what are confluence of factors that might contribute to that increase in the price of health care faster than the overall rate of inflation. Here's a little pie chart, just kind of showing the expenditures on health care by various